The room was darker than I expected when I pushed the door open. It was David's birthday party, and I had been running around the house making sure every guest had a drink in hand, every plate was filled. He said he wanted to step away for a moment, to freshen up. I thought I would surprise him with the cake, but instead, I froze at the threshold. There she was, Sophie, my best friend since college. She was standing in the middle of our bedroom, her fingers sliding down the straps of a silky red dress. One sleeve fell, then the other. She tilted her head back, laughing softly like she was on stage, and David sat on the edge of our bed watching her. The sight knocked the air out of me. My throat tightened, my stomach clenched. I gripped the cake knife so hard it nearly cut into my palm. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. Sophie's voice sliced through the silence. "Do you like it when I do this?" She twirled slowly, letting the dress fall lower, exposing more skin than I'd ever seen on her. David muttered something I couldn't even process. I wanted to scream, to rush in and claw that smug smile off her face. But something inside me, cold, calculating, told me to stop, to watch, to remember. My phone was still in my apron pocket. With shaking hands, I slid it out, pressed record, and through the tiny screen, I captured the truth. My husband leaning forward, my best friend peeling off her dress, her body bending and swaying in a mockery of intimacy. Then my eyes caught something that made my heart twist harder. Around Sophie's neck dangled the silver necklace I had given her for her 30th birthday. A piece of me, now twisted into this betrayal. I clenched my jaw so tight it hurt. My fingers shook as I pressed stop. I backed away silently, my shoes barely grazing the carpet. Neither of them noticed. They were too consumed in their performance. The music from downstairs muffled the sound of my retreat. Guests laughed, glasses clinked. The world was celebrating, while mine was collapsing in silence. I locked myself in the pantry, the smell of spices and sugar thick around me. My chest heaved as if the walls were closing in. I wanted to vomit, to rip off my own skin. My best friend, my husband. The two people I trusted most had turned me into a fool. I leaned my head against the shelves, biting down on my lip to keep from sobbing. But the tears came anyway, hot and relentless. I replayed the image in my mind, the way Sophie smiled, the way David's eyes followed her, and the necklace. God, the necklace. Why now? Why today? And how long had this been going on? 1,000 questions spun like knives in my head, each cutting deeper than the last. But then, somewhere inside me, the panic shifted. I wiped my tears with the back of my hand and looked at the video on my phone. The recording was clear, undeniable. For a moment, I imagined Sophie's parents, strict, proud, always so quick to lecture me about keeping a marriage strong. What would they say if they saw their perfect daughter like this? A cold thought formed in my mind, sharp and steady. They think this is a private performance. What if I made it public? What if her parents were the ones in the audience? I closed my eyes. My heart still ached, but a new fire sparked in my chest. They wanted a show? Then I would give them one. And when the curtain lifted, neither Sophie nor David would ever forget it. I wasn't always the woman hiding in pantries, clutching a phone full of secrets. Once, I was just Anna. I was the girl who stayed up late in college cramming for exams with Sophie, sharing cheap pizza and cheaper wine. She was the bold one, the one who turned heads, while I was the quiet shadow by her side. Back then, I didn't mind. I believed friendship was about balance, her fire and my calm. After graduation, Sophie chased freedom. I chased love. I met David at a networking event. He was charming in the way men in tailored suits know they are. His laugh was big, his promises even bigger. Within a year, I was Mrs. David Campbell. People told me I was lucky. Maybe I believed it. When our daughter Lily was born, I put my career in marketing on hold. Just for a few years, I told myself. But a few years stretched into more than a decade. David's career soared. Mine became PTA meetings, bake sales, and late-night laundry. I don't regret being there for Lily. She is the only piece of my life untouched by betrayal. But the truth is, I handed David the reins. I made him the center. And Sophie, my sister and everything but blood, slipped easily into our world. She was Lily's godmother, my partner in gossip-filled coffee mornings, the friend who always claimed to envy my perfect family. Perfect? What a cruel word. Now, in the dim light of the pantry, I replayed everything. The subtle hints I ignored. Sophie staying too long after dinners, David laughing too loudly at her jokes, the quick glances they exchanged when they thought I wasn't watching. And I remembered the night 6 months ago when Sophie insisted I let her babysit Lily so I could have a self-care night. I went to a movie alone, thinking she was doing me a favor. I came home to find the wine glasses in the sink, lipstick smudges on one of them. She claimed she'd just been unwinding. I smiled and believed her. How naive I was. I've always been the one who forgives too easily, who smooths over conflicts, who sacrifices. My mother used to say, "Anna, you bend so much for others, one day you'll snap." Tonight I felt that snap deep in my bones. But even in the middle of the hurt, I knew this wasn't just about Sophie. This wasn't just about David. It was about me. The woman who gave up her dreams for a man who now stared at another woman's body. The friend who gave her loyalty to someone who turned it into a weapon. My fingers tightened around the phone. The video glowed like a loaded gun. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like the quiet shadow. I felt like someone standing at the edge of something dangerous. Something powerful. I didn't know exactly how yet, but one thing was certain. David and Sophie would not walk away unscathed, and I, Anna Campbell, would not be their victim anymore. Our house always looked like the picture of stability from the outside. White shutters, a manicured lawn, the kind of place neighbors waved at as they jogged by, assuming everything inside was as perfect as it seemed. But perfection is a stage set, beautiful at first glance, hollow when you step behind the curtains. Inside those walls, I lived my double life. By day, the devoted wife and mother, planning meals, driving carpool, laughing politely at David's colleagues during cocktail hours. By night, the woman who couldn't shake the image of her best friend undressing for her husband. The house itself became the stage of my undoing. Every corner whispered secrets I hadn't wanted to hear. The kitchen counter, where Sophie and I once shared coffee, now felt like a crime scene. The couch in the living room where David and Sophie had sat too close during family movie nights. Suddenly, I remembered every brush of her hand against his. And our bedroom. I couldn't even walk past the door without my chest tightening. It wasn't just the house. David's company loomed over everything. He had worked for a tech firm climbing toward an IPO. Investors, meetings, deals. I'd heard the words tossed around our dinner table like confetti. But I hadn't understood the weight of them until recently. 2 weeks before his birthday, I'd caught sight of a file left open on his laptop. Stock transfers. Numbers so large they blurred before my eyes. My instinct was to close the computer and pretend I hadn't seen. That's what I always did, avoid the storm, keep the peace. But now, with betrayal burning in my chest, I remembered. He wasn't just cheating with Sophie. He was moving assets. Quietly, secretly, away from me. And Sophie? She wasn't just a mistress. She was always there, listening, asking too many questions about his job, about his stocks. She liked to pose as the supportive friend, the witty confidant. But I realized now, she was something else, a co-conspirator. The irony cut deep. The two people I trusted most had made my own home, my own life, their playground and their business meeting. I stood at the top of the staircase one evening, looking down at the grand dining room table where we hosted holidays. In 2 days, I would seat Sophie's parents there. I imagined Eleanor's sharp eyes narrowing at her daughter, Richard's stern voice breaking the silence. The dining room would no longer be a place of polite conversation. It would be the stage where I tore the mask off them both. The walls of this house had held too many lies. It was time they echoed with truth. And I would be the one to make sure every word of it rang out. Sophie was the kind of woman who knew how to command attention. At college, she was the one everyone noticed, the loudest laugh, the sharpest heels, the first to dance on tables at parties. I was the listener, the caretaker, the one who held her shoes when she stumbled home. Even after we grew older, she never lost that hunger to be seen. When she stepped into my house, it was as if she carried a spotlight with her. Lily adored her. David found her hilarious, and I thought her boldness balanced my quiet. But boldness can turn into something poisonous. In the weeks leading up to David's birthday, Sophie was around more than usual. She brought Lily little gifts, stayed long after dinners, laughed too easily at David's jokes. I noticed, but I shoved the unease aside. After all, she was my best friend. Now with my eyes wide open, I saw her for what she was, a woman who wanted what wasn't hers. And David, God, David, was weak enough to let her have it. The evidence was everywhere, once I let myself look. On a Wednesday afternoon, I caught a glimpse of Sophie's car parked a block away from David's office. She claimed she was just in the area. But I knew better. A week later, while folding laundry, I found a hotel receipt stuffed into David's jacket pocket. 1 room, 2 guests. The date matched the night Sophie had told me she was too sick to meet for coffee. Piece by piece, their lies stacked up like kindling. And then came the text messages. David's phone buzzed on the counter while he showered. I shouldn't have looked, but instinct told me to. The preview alone was enough to make me sick. I can't stop thinking about last night. Next time, no interruptions. Her name glowed at the top, Sophie. I opened the thread. Dozens of messages scrolled up. Plans, jokes at my expense, Sophie teasing him about how clueless I was. David replying with laughing emojis, with promises, with "I want you." My hands trembled so badly I nearly dropped the phone. But then, amidst the filth, another revelation. Sophie asking, "Did you move the shares yet?" Better before she notices anything. My chest tightened. This wasn't just lust. This was conspiracy. Sophie had stepped into my house, played with my daughter, smiled at me, and all the while she was helping my husband dismantle the life I'd built. For years, I thought Sophie wanted the spotlight, but no, she wanted my role, my home, my husband, even my child's affection. And David? He wasn't just a cheater. He was a man so blinded by greed and desire that he let my so-called best friend become his partner in betrayal. The night I pieced it all together, I sat alone in the living room, staring at the glow of my phone. Their messages mocked me, each word heavier than the last. I felt the betrayal in waves. Shock, fury, grief. But under it all, something else took root. A resolve as steady as steel. They thought they were clever. They thought I was blind. But I was watching now, and I was done being the fool in their game. The plan formed slowly, like a storm gathering at the edge of the sky. At first, I just wanted to scream, to throw the phone at David's face, to slap Sophie until her smug smile disappeared. But anger is loud and messy. Anger can be dismissed. Evidence, though. Evidence speaks louder. And humiliation in the right company? That can crush even the proudest liars. That's when Sophie's parents came to mind. Eleanor and Richard Montgomery. Richard, a retired judge, had always carried himself with the weight of the law still heavy on his shoulders. Eleanor, strict and sharp-tongued, never missed a chance to remind me how fortunate I was to have married David. To them, Sophie was the golden child who could do no wrong. Perfect daughter, perfect family, perfect lie. I wanted them to see the truth with their own eyes. So I sent out an invitation. Dinner at our home this Friday. I have something important to share. They accepted without hesitation. The days leading up to that night were torture. Every time David brushed past me, every time Sophie texted with some flimsy excuse to drop by, I clenched my teeth and forced myself to stay calm. I smiled, I cooked, I tucked Lily into bed. All the while, I carried the video on my phone like a secret weapon. Friday came. I dressed carefully, not in my usual soft sweaters, but in a tailored navy dress. Strong lines, stronger armor. The dining table gleamed under the chandelier, silverware polished, crystal glasses catching the light. The scene looked like any other family gathering, but my pulse drummed like a war drum beneath the surface. The doorbell rang. Eleanor and Richard arrived first, their expressions as composed as always. Eleanor kissed my cheek, her perfume sharp. Richard gave a curt nod. David walked in moments later, freshly shaved, smiling the smile that once charmed me but now made my skin crawl. And then Sophie appeared in a silk blouse too elegant for a casual dinner, her hair cascading in waves. She glanced at me, her eyes flickering with something, nervousness perhaps, or maybe arrogance. We sat. Plates clinked, wine poured. Conversation hovered over safe topics, Lily's school, the weather, David's company. I waited, letting the tension stretch. And then, when the moment felt right, I stood. "There's something I'd like to show you all," I said, my voice steady though my heart pounded. I picked up the remote. The television on the far wall flickered to life. The video played. Sophie in my bedroom, slipping her dress from her shoulders. David leaning forward. Her laughter, low and teasing. His eyes, hungry. The room fell silent except for the sound of betrayal echoing from the speakers. Eleanor gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Richard's face darkened, the veins in his temple bulging. David shot up from his chair, sputtering, "Anna, what the hell are you doing?" But I didn't flinch. Sophie's face drained of color. This is taken out of context," she stammered, her voice shaking. "Out of context," I said, my tone sharp as glass. "Undressing in my bedroom for my husband? Tell me, Sophie, what's the context for that?" No one answered. The silence pressed down like a weight. For once, Sophie had no performance left to give. That night, after the dining room emptied of shocked silence and shattered illusions, I collapsed onto the cold kitchen floor. The video had done its work. Every face around that table had seen the truth. Eleanor's sharp words had died on her tongue. Richard had looked at Sophie with something between fury and shame. David had stammered useless excuses, his mask crumbling. But when the doors closed and I was alone, the weight of it all pressed down on me. My hands shook as I braced against the tiles. My chest felt hollow, like someone had carved me out from the inside. The house was quiet, but my head was a storm. Every laugh, every glance, every lie replayed louder than before. I should have felt triumphant. I'd exposed them. Instead, I felt broken. In the bathroom mirror later that night, I didn't recognize myself. The lines around my eyes seemed deeper, carved by years of sacrifice no one valued. My skin looked pale, stretched thin over bones tired of holding me upright. I sank to the floor, my knees pulled to my chest, and the sobs came, violent, raw, unstoppable. It wasn't just the betrayal. It was the years I had lost, the career I had abandoned, the confidence I had let slip away piece by piece. All for a man who now stared at another woman with hunger, for a friend who laughed at my trust. For 3 days, I moved through life like a ghost. I drove Lily to school with sunglasses hiding my swollen eyes. I smiled at the neighbors, though my lips trembled. I cooked meals I could barely swallow. At night, I lay awake, listening to the emptiness beside me in bed, my body aching with loneliness. There were moments I thought about giving up, letting David have his way, letting Sophie replace me. Maybe I was too soft, too naive. Maybe they were right. I was the fool. But then Lily's voice cut through my haze one morning. She hugged me tightly before school, whispering, "I love you, Mom. You're the strongest person I know." The words hit me like a lifeline thrown into dark waters. Strong. She thought I was strong. I clung to that. That night, while scrolling through David's forgotten emails, I stumbled onto another folder. More documents, more transfers, hundreds of thousands of dollars moved quietly, hidden from me. My sorrow sharpened into something else. I realized grief had kept me paralyzed, but evidence could set me free. Every paper trail, every message, every secret transaction, it was no longer just betrayal of the heart. It was betrayal on paper, the kind that courts listened to. For the first time since the night of the dinner, I felt my back straighten. Yes, I had crumbled. Yes, I had broken. But broken pieces can cut, and I intended to use every single one. The folder on David's computer wasn't just a mistake. It was a confession. Line after line of wire transfers, dates, amounts, accounts I didn't recognize. At first the numbers blurred together, but then one figure caught my eye, $200,000. Quietly shifted into an account under David's name alone. I scrolled further, my hands trembling. It wasn't just once, it had been happening for months, maybe longer. Money pulled out in pieces, disguised as consulting fees, travel expenses, investment transfers. He wasn't saving for our family, he was siphoning from it. I opened another document, an unsigned contract. The words jumped out at me. Sale of private shares, competitor acquisition, full transfer of ownership. My stomach dropped. This wasn't just about infidelity. David wasn't planning to leave me only as a wife. He was planning to strip me bare as a partner. And Sophie knew. Her text messages, once just a taunt, now read like evidence. "Did you move the shares yet?" Better before she notices anything. She wasn't just the mistress, she was the strategist. Together, they weren't only betraying me, they were building a future on the ruins of mine. I leaned back in the chair, staring at the glow of the screen. A cold wave washed over me. All the years I'd spent trusting him with the finances, believing his promises, handing him the control, it all came back to this. My sacrifice had become his weapon. But grief was no longer my companion. Clarity was. I copied every file, every transfer, draft contract, every whisper of conspiracy. My fingers moved with a steadiness that surprised me. When I was done, I sat in the dark office, the only sound the hum of the computer. And then, as if fate wanted to twist the knife, a new email arrived. It was from Sophie. "Don't forget Friday. If we can get the deal through before quarter close, we'll have everything set. Then she can't touch a thing." I let out a bitter laugh. They were planning to erase me completely, but they'd forgotten one detail. I wasn't powerless anymore. In that moment, I understood. This wasn't just about exposing their affair. This was about dismantling the empire they thought they were building together. And when I was finished, neither David nor Sophie would own anything, except their shame. The documents I copied were damning enough, but fate wasn't done handing me weapons. A week later, while David showered, his phone buzzed on the nightstand. Normally, I would have ignored it, but something in me had changed. I no longer feared what I might find. I hunted for it. The message preview froze my blood. From Sophie, "Make sure you delete the draft from your email. If her lawyer finds it, it's over." Her lawyer. She already anticipated a fight. My hand steadied as I unlocked the phone. The message thread unraveled before me. It wasn't just lust and mockery anymore. It was strategy, step by step. Sophie had attached a file. My pulse raced as I opened it. A scanned contract. Not just talk this time, not a draft, a signed agreement. David's signature scrawled at the bottom. Sophie's handwriting in the notes. They had already agreed to sell his shares. Shares that should have secured our family's future, to a rival company, at a fraction of their worth. A deliberate undercut, a betrayal not just of me but of every colleague who trusted him. And the kicker, the contract date was backdated by 2 months. Fraud, clear and undeniable. I swallowed hard. This wasn't just marital betrayal. This was criminal. The realization hit like lightning. If I presented this to the right people, David wouldn't just lose me. He could lose his career, his reputation, maybe even his freedom. And Sophie, tied to every email and message, would be dragged down with him. I forwarded the entire thread and attachment to my private email, then deleted my tracks. My heart pounded, but a strange calm settled over me. For years, David and Sophie had controlled the narrative. They played the roles of successful businessman and glamorous friend, while I was the supporting character in their script. But now I held the script in my hands, and I had the power to rewrite the ending. Later that night, I stood in the doorway of Lily's room, watching her sleep, her small body curled under blankets, her breath steady, innocent, safe, for now. I whispered into the darkness, "He won't take this from us. She won't take this from us." I wasn't just fighting for revenge anymore, I was fighting for survival. The affair was ugly, the humiliation unbearable. But this proof of fraud was my arsenal, and when the time came, I would unleash it, not just to expose them, but to destroy the empire they thought was untouchable. There comes a point when pain no longer weakens you, it hardens you. For weeks, I had lived in shadows, haunted eyes, sleepless nights, carrying betrayal like a second skin. But once the evidence sat safely in my hands, something inside me shifted. I booked an appointment at a salon I hadn't stepped into in years. When I looked into the mirror afterward, I barely recognized myself. My hair, once dulled by neglect, now framed my face in sleek waves. The stylist's words echoed, "You look like a woman who knows exactly what she wants." For the first time, I believed it. The transformation wasn't just physical. I dusted off my resume, polished it with the same precision I'd once poured into David's image. Within weeks, I landed interviews. My portfolio, though a decade old, still spoke with strength. And when I walked into the glass-walled office of a marketing firm downtown, I didn't walk as a desperate housewife, I walked as a strategist with scars that made me sharper. They offered me the position of creative director, a title I had once dreamed of, then sacrificed. Now it was mine again. David barely noticed. He was too busy spiraling, too busy covering tracks he didn't know I had already uncovered. Sophie, too, seemed distant, her visits less frequent, her texts more urgent. They were unraveling. Meanwhile, I was rebuilding. I traded my worn cardigans for tailored blazers. I stood straighter, spoke firmer. Neighbors began to comment, "Anna, you look radiant these days." They didn't know the fire behind it. Even Lily noticed. One evening she sat at the kitchen table, chin in her hands, watching me prep dinner in heels and a fitted dress straight from the office. "You look like a boss, Mom," she said, her eyes shining. I laughed, but inside I nearly cried. For so long, I had wanted her to see stability. Now, she saw strength. The house that once felt like a prison became my headquarters. The dining table where Sophie and David had laughed too freely was now covered in folders, legal notes, financial statements. My lawyer, sharp, relentless, assured me the case was airtight. Infidelity, fraud, financial betrayal. David would have no ground to stand on. Every night, I practiced what I would say. Not the broken whispers of a betrayed wife, but the measured voice of a woman who refused to be erased. By the time the court date was set, I no longer felt fear. I felt anticipation. They thought they had stripped me of everything, but they had done the opposite. They had stripped away my illusions, and what was left was a woman who no longer bent for anyone. The courthouse smelled faintly of paper and polish, the kind of sterile place where lives are dismantled and rebuilt. I walked through the tall glass doors in a navy suit, heels clicking against marble floors. Beside me, my lawyer carried a thick binder, the weight of months of secrets turned into evidence. David was already there, his tie knotted too tightly, sweat shining at his temples. Sophie sat a row behind him, pale and rigid. For once, her confidence had cracked. Eleanor and Richard avoided my eyes. They hadn't forgiven her. The dinner I hosted had shattered their perfect image forever. When the judge entered, the air thickened. My lawyer began calmly, methodically. First came the video, Sophie in my bedroom undressing for my husband. The room stirred with murmurs. David shifted, his jaw tightening, Sophie's face burning with shame. Then came the text messages. Every laugh at my expense, every promise of a future built without me. The words spoke louder than my own could. But the final blow was the contract. The fraudulent sale agreement, David's signature clear as day, the backdated paperwork, the emails tying Sophie to every step. The judge leaned forward, eyes narrowing. David's lawyer tried to object, sputtering about irrelevant personal matters, but the judge cut him off. This isn't just personal. This borders on criminal. David's face collapsed in on itself. By the end of the hearing, the decision was swift. I was granted full custody of Lily. David was ordered to surrender half his remaining assets, though after legal investigations into the fraudulent contract, there might not be much left for him to cling to. Sophie was dismissed from the courtroom without a word from her parents. Richard couldn't even look at her. Eleanor sat stiff, her lips pressed into a thin line. Their golden daughter had become their disgrace. When the gavel struck, I felt something break free inside me. Not joy exactly, not relief, something steadier. Justice. Outside the courthouse, reporters buzzed. David's company was under review, whispers of fraud spreading like wildfire. He avoided cameras, his once proud posture now slouched and broken. Sophie disappeared into the backseat of a car, her head bowed. And me? I stepped out into the sunlight. Lily ran into my arms, her little body anchoring me back to what mattered most. "Did we win, Mom?" she asked. I kissed her forehead. "Yes, baby, we did." That night, in our new home, smaller, humbler, but ours, I tucked Lily into bed. I poured myself a glass of wine and sat by the window. The world outside was quiet, but inside me, the noise had finally stopped. They had tried to strip me of everything, my dignity, my marriage, my future. But they had only cleared the path for me to build something stronger. I wasn't the woman hiding in shadows anymore. I wasn't the fool they mocked in their texts. I was the woman who exposed them, who survived them, who rebuilt herself piece by piece until she was whole again. And as I looked out at the night sky, I whispered the truth that had carried me through. They thought they destroyed me, but all they did was set me free. A year has a strange way of softening sharp edges. When I think back to that night, Sophie undressing in my bedroom, David's hungry eyes, I no longer feel the same fire in my chest. The rage has cooled, the grief has healed, leaving only a scar. And scars, I've learned, are proof that wounds can close. Life after the storm looks different. The house where everything fell apart is no longer mine. I sold it. Too many ghosts lived in its walls. Now Lily and I live in a smaller home with creaky floors and a garden where she plants sunflowers each spring. It's not grand, but it's warm. It's ours. My new role as creative director is demanding, but it fuels me in ways I'd forgotten I needed. I walk into boardrooms now with my head high, my voice steady. Colleagues call me decisive, innovative, bold, words no one used for me when I lived in David's shadow. Lily is thriving. She talks about becoming a lawyer one day, so no one can trick us again. I smile when she says that, though inside, I ache at how much she's had to learn about betrayal at such a young age. Still, she's strong. Stronger than I was at her age, and that gives me hope. As for David, he moved out of state, chasing what scraps of reputation he had left. The fraud investigation gutted his career. He sees Lily on scheduled weekends, awkward and distant. She doesn't talk much about him afterward, and I don't push. Sophie, she disappeared from our lives entirely. Word spread that she'd moved back in with her parents for a while, but even they keep her at arm's length. The last I heard, she was working at a small boutique in another city. For someone who thrived on attention, obscurity must be its own prison. Sometimes, late at night, I wonder if they ever think about what they lost. But then I remind myself, it doesn't matter. Their downfall isn't my closure. My closure is waking up each morning, free. I no longer measure my worth by the ring on my finger or the approval of a friend. I measure it by the woman I see in the mirror. Steady, scarred, but unbroken. If someone asked me now, I would tell them this. The truth can burn, but it also cleanses. And though betrayal nearly destroyed me, it gave me something priceless in return, myself.
And that wraps up today's story. Now we want to hear from you. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments, and let's see how far these stories reach. If this story moved you or gave you chills, give it a like, share, and subscribe for more powerful stories. One last thing, rate the story from 1 to 10 in the comments. Your feedback helps us bring you even better ones next time. Thanks for watching. We appreciate you being part of this storytelling journey.